on. But first, we want to talk about the Lee Keegan story. Mike Finnerty is on the line. Mike has this story in the Mayo News this week, and actually now this morning it's obviously all over the rest of the back pages as well. The hardest working man in Irish journalism, Mike.
Morning, Ger. It's been a busy few days, all right.
I'd say so. So just before we actually get to what the story is about Lee Keegan, you might tell us exactly how this all came about.
Yeah, well, I met Lee last week for a sit-down interview as part of the build-up to the Mayo News Club Stars Awards. They're the awards we hold every year, usually in December, just to celebrate the best and brightest of Mayo club footballers every season. And Lee would have been a big supporter of the Club Star Awards. He would have won an award last year, and we sat down last week to help launch it, to do a photo shoot. And as part of the conversation, we obviously spoke about this rumour that had been doing the rounds in the last few weeks. In particular, it was, I suppose, a story that just started off as a whisper maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, but snowballed incredibly quickly, and in the last 2 weeks was being peddled almost as fact by an awful lot of people, and obviously would have began inside the Mayo County boundaries. But I mean, by say 2 weeks ago, inside the last 10 days, I would have been contacted, and a lot of the guys in our office, I suppose, who would be seen as guys who surely you would know if there was any truth in this, we were being contacted by people from right across the country and outside the country as well. It just seemed to really get legs, and as I said, was being passed off as fact.
And so obviously Lee himself heard. Lee himself had heard the rumours.
Yeah, and obviously nobody had spoken to Lee from outside his immediate circle about it until we spoke about it last week. I wasn't sure if Lee was aware of it or not, and if he was, how he felt about it. But he was aware. He had been approached by quite a few people. His family had been approached as well by people who genuinely meant well, and were almost sympathising with his family about the news, and had again accepted it as fact. And that had obviously upset members of his family, and Lee just felt it was important to clarify the situation, as he said, and to get the message out there.
So what was the rumour, Mike?
Well, the rumour was initially that Lee was suffering with some sort of serious illness, that he'd got bad news of some sort, and then again, as the days went by and as the hours went by, in the last couple of weeks, it had hardened into the news that he'd been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and that's obviously a very serious condition, very serious disease. It affects the central nervous system, and as I said, it was just being accepted. And the speed with which it was travelling was incredible, and I suppose that's a sign of the times now. There's so many ways to communicate, social media platforms, and just, I suppose, the perfect storm in that he's such a high-profile footballer. There is a huge interest nowadays in the life and the welfare and the well-being of these elite athletes, and it just was incredible how quickly it seemed to get around. And I mean, you couldn't go to a game, you couldn't knock on your phone at some point in the day without somebody just inquiring whether it was true, passing comment on how awful it was. And I think it was David Brady that tweeted yesterday, some people out of, I suppose, genuine affection for Lee Keegan would just seem to be spreading the rumour as well. And at no point, obviously, did anybody stop and sort of ask the question, well, is it true? You know, is this something that we should be adding to?
Yeah, and so you're sitting across from Lee Keegan in rude health, with the exception of a couple of hip injuries that he's getting fixed, and he's looking at you going, Jesus, I have no idea how the hell this started.
Yeah, exactly, and genuinely, that is exactly how he would have put it, that he just couldn't figure out. It's almost a guessing game, trying to figure out. I mean, you could throw out a few theories. He did spend a few days in hospital at the end of July. He was diagnosed with cellulitis in his foot, and obviously missed the Mayo Roscommon drawn game. And certainly around that time, there was quite a bit of talk about the fact that Lee did spend a few days in hospital on being treated for the condition. So that, unless that may have been where it initially got legs. again, the way things are nowadays, it just seems that somebody somewhere started a story that Lee had wasn't well or had an illness, and then it just got added to, and WhatsApp in particular seems to have really taken hold in terms of a method of allowing stories to travel and to really get oxygen. And over the course of 2, 3, 4 weeks, it just snowballed completely out of control to a point where it was almost just being spoken about in hushed tones by so many people.
He must have been pretty upset about this because, he obviously knows the truth that he's grand, but family members, no doubt, are being approached by people going, "Jesus, it's terrible about Lee."
Yeah, what struck me, I suppose, the two things that struck me mainly about how, in his own words, how disappointed he was by it was A, the effect it had on his family members, and B, he was genuinely upset himself that people who would have been diagnosed with the condition or would have the condition, that his name was being linked with it. And obviously that was something that really he was concerned about, that people who genuinely were suffering from the condition and maybe would have the realities of it to deal with would be in some way convinced that he was also in that boat as well. And he said, it's a serious condition. It's not something that needs to be spoken about the way it has been, just because of his profile. And I suppose it reminds you as well that, sometimes the likes of Lee Keegan in particular are sort of a cartoon superhero to Mayo supporters and a sort of a pantomime villain to so many others. I mean, at the end of the day, he's a 28-year-old guy. He's got engaged recently enough. He's got a job. He's just had a double hip operation. He's got a family and a mum and a dad in particular, who he's very, very close with. And, he's having to deal with this literally while he's trying to do his day job and while he's trying to get on with his life. And, as I said, some people genuinely mean well or meant well, but it really, I think, is one of those stories that makes you just stop and think about the way that we're communicating now, and there's a need there for personal responsibility, because somebody somewhere definitely added an extra layer or two to this. And so the only good news, obviously, for Lee is that it's not true, and he's been in a position to come out and just clarify it, because even last week when I met him, I mean, it just reminded you he really is a very, very decent fella. He was very generous with his time to us. Anything he would do to help us launch our awards, they're done in terms of charity every year. He's a really, really decent guy, and he just got caught up in something that was completely not of his own making. And I think he was right just to clarify it, because it's one of those stories and one of those situations where if you don't come out and address it, it will linger in the background. And there would have been a suggestion there into the new season, and a cloud hanging over him and his health. Whereas at least this way, he's set the record straight.
Mike, just before we let you go, I just wanted to ask you about his hip injuries, because you mentioned there he's had double keyhole surgery. For a 28-year-old, it seems incredibly young, but what jumps out of the papers at me this morning from your pieces is that Lee Keegan says that his doctor says that this is quite normal now for young GAA players, which is pretty astonishing, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. And I suppose the type of guy Lee Keegan is, he chats about a double hip operation like he's just put a band-aid on a small cut. He's just got such a positive sort of an outlook generally. And I mean, I even asked him how he felt about taking on the rehab program for the next 4 or 5 months, and his attitude was, I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that has been mapped out in front of me. I'm looking forward to getting back playing already, and obviously just looking to the next challenge, the next game, next summer. But from his own point of view, I mean, it's just I suppose a reminder that he's put down 7 seasons now of hard, intense inter-county football. In Mayo's case, they've been going to the latter stages every season. I mean, even if you look at Lee's last 12 months, got to the All-Ireland final of 2016 with Mayo, which went to a replay, went straight from that to the international rules with Ireland, went straight from that to the club championship campaign with Westport. They went and won the All-Ireland in February, and literally within 6 days, he was back on the field for Mayo. 6 days after winning the All-Ireland with Westport, he came on against Roscommon in the Allianz League. And obviously then that ran straight into summer. So he's been on a relentless sort of a treadmill, and he made the point about those hip injuries that it's just it's wear and tear. It's literally running repairs on the wear and tear, and obviously the way he plays the game as well, so abrasive and so attritional, and he says himself he doesn't want to miss games. He wants to play every game. It's just I suppose a reminder that he's got a lot of mileage up, and he's just got to be careful now. And maybe it's the best thing in the world for him. These 3, 4, maybe even 5 months that he's going to have to spend out just to build up the body again and give himself a break
and let it recuperate.
Because it's been pretty relentless.
Yeah, for sure. Mike, great stuff. Thanks very much for sharing that story, and well done on the scoop. It turns out that Lee Keegan is totally grand apart from his hip injury, which hopefully will just be a spring off for him, and we'll see him again in the summertime.